Okay, cool. So I haven't got tons of time to run through something which I think I've probably spent a year refining, but I'm going to hopefully give you a whiz-stop tour today of, well, basically how important I think having defined processes and documentation is, no matter which stage in your productized service development you are. So you've already mentioned that my name's Danny. I am a completely first-time founder. I run Scribly.io, which is a content marketing service. And I was a copywriter back in the day, and I kind of just wanted to like scale what I was doing beyond what I was able to do as a single person. And the idea for Scribly was born in 2018 and now generates around 30K a month. Which has just been like a process of total trial and error. I honestly have got no clue what I'm doing. But along the journey of getting to here, making lots and lots of mistakes, I think some of the biggest things I've learned have been just how important it is to put those frameworks in place, which I didn't do for the longest time. And actually, so today I'll be guiding you on this single biggest framework that was missing for me, which is not having clear documentation or processes. I would say the last 6 months of the last 2 years have been the period where Scribly has actually flourished. Before that, it was growing and it was doing okay, but it was pretty stagnant. There wasn't that much growth, and it was very much like there was a cap on what was possible. And it was just taking me forever to figure out, like, why can't I just can't seem to get past this point. And it was only when I finally took a step back and just kind of took everything out of my head and put it down on paper that the business was finally able to really kind of scale in a meaningful way. So while processes and documentation definitely aren't the sexiest things, and I'm sure you'll have loads of talks today that are cooler for sure, I think this is the key thing that you need to be focusing on right from day one if you want to be able to scale with ease. And if you don't do it, or if you get it a bit wrong, you're probably going to remain a massive blocker that will likely just keep you at a place that's not your full potential. So today, just to define kind of like why this was so important for me. Once I was able to implement this for Scribly, I was able to grow it from 15 to 30K, so effectively double the business within 6 months. And that's without doing anything differently, other than hiring people, which was a really critical blocker that I was struggling from before that, and also building in an editorial, like a proper editorial team into our workflow. And I was able to stop being a blocker, which I'll talk about probably a lot of times, because it took my ego a long time to realize that I was just really holding the business back by, never being able to take a day off, because quite frankly, no one but me could figure out the very important things, like how we price for things that are custom packages, or if somebody wants something and like I need to get an outside person to do it because, like, for example, last year I was getting married and I needed to take some time off. I couldn't rest that they were going to do it properly. So big business blocker that also has a big impact on your mental health, I think. So by the end of this short session, what we'll do is figure out exactly what a defined process looks like and what clear documentation looks like. Again, there's not like there's no golden rule on how you do this. It's just how I've done it and it works for me, but hopefully it will give you a bit of inspiration to figure out the right process for you guys. We'll also cover why that's so important and how to actually go about creating your own. So the problem is pretty obvious when you are on the other side of it, but actually really difficult to see when you're in it. So when you're an early founder, so much of what you're doing is just hacking a service together. Like, you don't have processes. So you're figuring things out on the go, and you're using a patchwork of different systems and tools. And eventually you create systems, but they all live in your head. And no one but you really knows how it is that you got from A to B. And that can continue for the longest time without you even realizing it. And it makes it really impossible for you to create something scalable, because you don't have a kind of formula that you can replicate ad infinitum. And you really will struggle to hire effectively, not because you can probably find great people, but you're not going to set them up for success, because if they don't have the tools they need to know exactly how you would want them to do their job, they're inevitably going to find their own way of doing it, because we're all human and there is no one size, that fits all. So you will eventually just take on loads of stress and you will burn out. And take it from me, it will happen. I did it and it was not fun. So these are kind of critical issues that emerge when you are working in a bit more of a random way, or you're not really working with standard processes. So how to solve it is to create very clear, very defined, very repeatable ways of doing things that anybody, anywhere, anytime, no matter how new to the business they are, can read and then replicate. So yeah, a defined process is very, very simple. It's just a fixed way of doing something. If you need to get from A to B, if you need to deliver a service from purchase to delivery, how do you do that? And it can be, the key things that it needs to demonstrate are just the step-by-step processes that you expect someone to do in order to do a good job. So as general rule of thumb, a defined process should always be documented. It should always be the same. It should be repeatable and understandable and flexible, because even though it's a productized service that you're building, you're going to have edge cases that you'll need to adapt to. So it should, just give enough detail that people feel empowered that they can then go and, implement no matter what scenario comes up. So the key thing is that when you are bringing new people into your business, they should kind of have a single source of truth that helps them to do a task just as you would. And it's really, really difficult to convince yourself that it's worth doing this when you're running a business by yourself. But as the business grows, you're going to develop so much knowledge in your head that doesn't exist anywhere else. And that's going to be a huge blocker moving forwards as and when you start to need to bring more people into the business. So definitely do make time prioritize doing this from day one. Like, the best advice I ever got was, don't think of yourself as a freelancer, think of yourself as a business owner. So rather than thinking, how am I going to do this task? Ask yourself, who am I going to get to do this task? Because when you have that mindset, you really do have the foundation of a really scalable business. So effectively, every single part of your business needs to be clearly defined, but the most important things are most important things are your sales and CRM. That was definitely an area that I just struggled massively with until I created defined processes. Pricing, delivery, and just general operations, like how you track your costs, how you manage your finances, your marketing, and of course, like how you onboard new people into the business. And after this slide, I'll stop talking about why it's so important, and show you some examples. But the key thing I want you to just take away, there really is there's nothing intelligent about how to do this. It's really just finding what works for you and keeping it as simple as it possibly can be, so that you can not only keep it up to date, but also that anybody can work with it. Because what I found was, I didn't think I had processes, but actually I was doing things in a systematic way. It's just that I hadn't ever documented it. I hadn't ever made it concrete. So once I got that stuff out of my head, I was like, oh, wow, yeah, actually I do have systems. I just didn't realize it. So now your task is really to take everything out of your head, put it onto paper, and then get other people to execute it as much and as often as you need them to. And I use Notion to document everything with Scribly. It's kind of become like a company wiki. So this is just one example of one part of the documentation that I have for Scribly. And you can see here that it covers everything from, I'll just play that again actually, covers everything from tools that we use, how we do certain things, different parts of our operations and finances, how our sales process works. And each of those areas, you can click into them and there's much more detail on what they actually, these are just kind of entry points. So to give you an example on the how-tos, I've got things that are like very critical, like how to assign articles. That's like a really important thing that we do, right down to very, basic things like how to upload blog posts to Webflow or how to import blog posts to Medium, which are essential parts of our marketing, but can be a bit tricky to do if you're particularly working with remote VAs who may never have worked with these tools before, and can sometimes like need a bit of, there's just like processes that you want them to follow, like the types of images they should use, the way they should tag things, like all of this stuff which isn't obvious to a brand new set of eyes coming into your ecosystem. And the key thing to remember here is this is not like an academic journal on like how to do something. Like this is not how to do keyword research generally. What matters is how to do keyword research for my business. What is our process at Scribly? And similarly, sales, there's like 1,000 different sales processes. So we've just like articulated ours so that anybody coming into that function knows exactly how to run with that job. So I've defined 2 different types of documentation at Scribly, and that's broadly speaking, how-tos, which is a bit like the ones we saw before. These are kind of step-by-step guides. And the second one is general processes, which are more like kind of strategic documents of this is why we do something, and this is the process that we have, and these are the kind of like core things you need to remember to do every day when you're in that function. And I'll run you through some examples. So an example of a how-to, this is how to upload a blog post on Webflow. Now, effectively, it's like a step-by-step guide. And at every point in the process, there are like clear things to remember. So remember that, the images should be this size. Remember that they should be tagged in this way. The heading should be like so. This is how you do, it's just like really, really thorough breakdown of how to do a specific task. And this has been super important because what I've been able to then do is offload a lot of these tasks which are taking me, an hour or 2 a week. I've just been able to send this document to a VA and get it done without any need for back and forth questions or any kind of confusion. So the key thing to remember for the how-tos is just make sure you really, really break it down to like the tiniest detail. Even if something seems super obvious to you, it won't be to a new person coming into this for the first time. So over communicate rather than under communicate. And then an example of a general process is, this is like quite a long page, so it's going quite quickly, but this is our sales process, and it's or our inbound sales process, I should say. So it really will define like how do we classify leads? Where do they go into in our CRM? How do you respond to different types of leads? It's like each of these parts of the puzzle, how do they fit together and what do you need to do in relation to them? So yeah, it's like really important to define not just the what, but also why it's so important, because there are lots of different ways of doing things and you need to communicate how everything fits together. So as a general rule of thumb, I would say like keep your documentation super tight by linking different pieces together. So you can see here, if I just go back to the beginning again, this daily routine for sales links to 2 other documents that they need to read before they start this process. Again, it just keeps it really digestible. It keeps it organized. It's much easier to work with when it's like that. It doesn't become overwhelming. So if you were to just take away 5 really important things that I've learned anyway throughout the process of building out our documentation ecosystem and our processes, keep it super simple. This applies to both processes and documentation. Like condense the way you do something down into its simplest possible form, because that way you make it much more likely to be a process that everyone can follow. Even if something seems super simple to you, write it down in your documentation, because I guarantee someone will come along and completely do it, like throw a curveball in how they do something. You're like, oh wow, yeah, like I thought that was like how everyone thought about this, but obviously I'm just too deep in my little world of work. Make sure you organize everything with a tool that helps you. Sorry, when the chat comes up, I like get distracted by the chat. So anyway, back to my 5 important rules. Write down every little step, make it super visual. Every person that you interact with will have very different, now I just realized you can see that as well. Every person you interact with will have different needs in terms of how they consume information. So I like to use screenshots and videos, but some people will prefer to do like video walkthroughs. It's entirely up to you, but what I would say is like show rather than tell as much as possible. And then remember, like the most important thing is that this is a living organism. Your business, especially a small business, will change so much over the course of time. Like you'll look back in 6 months and be like, I can't believe how we used to do things. That was so stupid. And because you'll grow and mature so much in a short space of time with this kind of business. So keep it up to date. Make sure you revisit it very often, because even subtle changes that you make to your processes, if you then send that documentation to someone, might have a knock-on effect of people just doing things in the wrong way. So this is like an important commitment you should make to your business. And then the 4 things I think, if you were going to do anything after watching this talk, would be, oh, sorry, I've just realized these are in your way as well. First things first, more things than you think will be in your head that are not obvious. So get everything out. Like I started by literally doing brainstorms on different categories of things, from sales right through to how we deliver stuff. And I got like, okay, we do this for that, we do this for that. And I started then to organize it into categories. So really try and pull all of the knowledge, all of the implicit stuff that you've built up in your brain and get it out. These might even just be ideas of how you think you should be doing things, but start to write those down. And then map out the 5 most business critical processes in detail. So those could be 1 for sales, 1 for marketing, 1 for operations, 1 for finance. And just so that if you ever at some point needed to, like imagine I just need to take a day off. What would someone need to do to keep the ship sailing? Map out those critical processes in detail, visually and clearly. And then after that, there's loads of these little ones, like how to upload a blog post or how to, write a Twitter thread from a blog post. That's like, I have a defined way that I like those things to be done, but they're not critical. So I just allocated a bit of time every day where I will update those types of documentation. And then once you've got them, they're there. You don't need to, this is like you're kind of front loading that effort, and then you might only need to do 30 minutes a month after that. So it's, yeah, do it once, long-term pain, long-term gain, short-term pain, long-term gain, sorry. And then very lastly, make sure to share everything that you write with your whole team. Like this should be a living document, a working document. It shouldn't just sit in a Google Drive somewhere and no one use it. So make sure you're keeping this a collaborative piece of work with all of your, even if you don't have any team members now, like when you start to bring people in, share everything with them so they feel part of more than just one specific task, and they understand like how everything fits together. And then lastly, thank you for listening. I really do mean this. Like this has been such a journey for me on so many levels. Like I've learned so much. I'm really not an entrepreneurial person at all. I suppose I am now, but I definitely wasn't when I started this. And I really wish I knew to do this right at the very beginning, because I think I would have saved myself a lot of time and a lot of like personal stresses if I had just kind of realized how important it is to have to create systems around your business, because it protects you and it protects your business, and it makes you it gives you scope to grow as and when you need to. And definitely do contact me. I'm very, very happy to answer any questions you have about how I've done things and how you might approach it for your business. And I've just put my contact details there. So thank you so much. I hope that was helpful, and I've probably gone over. I'm a bit of a talker, sorry, but thank you.
No, that was fantastic, Daniela. I think like I can see everyone in the chat is just saying that like how much they really, really enjoyed that, how helpful that was. I was
Oh,
very
amazing.
curious to say
I was
again.
trying
Sorry?
to keep up with the comments. I'll read them all now. That's super cool.
I was really interested to see how the way you're using Notion. I love that sort of two-column view that you have. On the one side it's the text, and the other side it's all the visuals. Just makes
Mm.
it really easy to follow for people. Um, yeah, it was really interesting, and it kind of ties in well because actually one of our speakers later, Temirlan, who's actually in the room with us at the moment, he's actually a Notion Pro, and so that's sort of
Nice.
the area that he focuses on, like helping people getting everything into Notion. So he's going to be talking more about that later on during the day.
So
So
cool,
really,
yeah. And I think like Notion is such a great tool. Like if you start to build out just one thing, like your processes, you can, I'm pretty sure, build out pretty much like the backbone of your business in it once you learn all of the ins and outs. It's really powerful.
absolutely.